Forstater, the co-founder of the charity Sex Matters and the campaigner with For Women Scotland, the group who brought that case today. Maya Forstater, thanks so much for being with us this evening. So, look, it's taken a long time for you to reach this point. How are you?
We're delighted. This judgment was really clear. It put women's rights at the centre, and it took the Equality Act back to what it should have been. And it's been clouded by layers and layers of misunderstanding. What the judges said was that the Equality Act protects everyone. It protects people against sex discrimination, age discrimination, race, disability, and gender reassignment. So it protects trans people against discrimination, for example, losing their job or being paid less or being refused to rent a flat, for example. But it also protects women against sex discrimination, and that includes enabling organisations to have single-sex spaces and services, and to do things like if somebody wants a female doctor, that they can have a female doctor. And what the Supreme Court said was that these two protected characteristics are different and they shouldn't be conflated. Everyone's rights are protected, but women's rights are women's rights.
You will have heard what Ellie had to say to me before you and I spoke. A real sense of fear from Ellie, and she says from her friends within the community. I mean, what do you say to trans people who are feeling that kind of concern this evening after this ruling?
I think, that there is a real conflict between men who want to use women's spaces and women who want privacy and dignity. And in this case, the Supreme Court ruled in favour of women's privacy and dignity and in favour of having clear rules. That doesn't mean that trans people are excluded from public life. It just means that everyone is excluded from single-sex services and spaces that don't belong to them. And that's going to be disappointing for people who identify as trans, because for the last 15 years, they've been told by organisations who've misunderstood the law that they have the right to access spaces where other people depend on them for privacy, for safety, and for fairness in terms of sport. And so they are going to be disappointed, but that's just the way it is.
Maya, look, you will have heard Ellie as well say that this ruling has made it more complicated. Do you see it as that way, that it's now become more complicated? We've already got the NHS, because of what you said, for 15 years of having one way of looking at this, now re-looking at it again, which will potentially lead to further complication?
No, I think it's made it simpler. The NHS currently has rules that say they operate single-sex accommodation. So it's not single-sex wards, but like bays in hospitals. And so they guarantee people that they will have single-sex room where they're sleeping. But then they say that people who identify as trans should be accommodated according to their pronouns and the clothes they wear. And everyone knows that a man who wears women's clothing and changes his pronouns is not a woman. It's not fair on the women in those hospital wards to find themselves sharing a bedroom with a man. And often when we talk to NHS nurses and doctors, what they will actually do is put a trans person in a side room. But that's not what the policy tells them to do. The policy tells them to place someone according to their pronouns and their clothing. And most NHS workers know that that's not safe and it's not fair. So what this judgment does, it does something very simple. It says that men are men and women are women. And in most parts of life, it doesn't matter what sex you are. But in places where it does, you need to be clear.
Yeah, but let me just push on that a little bit, because then you could have some trans women who then feel excluded from the space that they think they should be in that particular instance.
But they're men. They might feel excluded, but the fact is that's a space for women. And somebody who's a man who wishes he was a woman is not a woman. And I'm sorry if he feels excluded, but we need to have clear rules in order to protect the people who those services are intended for. And that doesn't mean treating people badly or not treating them at all. Men who identify as transgender, who call themselves trans women, may be a vulnerable subset of men, but they don't share an experience with women because they're not women.
You will have seen some of the political reaction, Maya, right? Kemi Badenoch saying there's still more work to be done. I mean, do you agree with that there's still more that needs to be done here?
Yes. I mean, this is a really good judgment, but most people don't read Supreme Court judgments. What they need is very clear guidance from the government and clear guidance from the regulator, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and the Health and Safety Inspectorate to just make it really clear to employers, to service providers, to local councils, to schools, to universities, what they're expected to do without having to read the Supreme Court judgment. And that's down to the government. It's also down to the government what data they collect on people. You know, when they ask people what sex you are, the answer should be male or female, not 56 different categories.
I mean, do you expect this government now to adhere to this? We already know that there seems to be some disagreement, perhaps, within the Labour Party. We know where Kemi Badenoch stands, but the Labour Party?
There's been good statements from Keir Starmer and from Bridget Phillipson saying that they support this judgment. They are the government. It was the Labour Party's Equality Act that this Supreme Court judgment is upholding. And so now it's up to them to implement it and put it into practice.
All right, Maya Forstater, really good to speak with you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you, Maya.